Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever struggled with money, no matter how little or much you make, then do we have the Worth It show for you. Today I'll be talking with Amanda Steinberg, founder of the million subscriber newsletter Daily Worth, the website dailyworth.com, which has made Forbes 100 best websites for women 3 years running, Worth FM, and one of my all-time favorite books on money, Worth It. And that's just what I want to talk with her about today, about how to create your life, your money, and your terms. That plus we'll talk about Maya and the Green Room, turning down the White House, a Y2K survival kit, Raw Goddess and Leah Endreas, Cinderella and Snow White, talking heads and burning down the house, and what in the world beating Kid Icarus has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Amanda. Are you ready to shine?
I am so ready. I can't wait to hear what you have to say on all these subjects.
Well, we're going to have a little fun. You were concerned maybe we needed to have a little fun today, and I am going to certainly try to deliver. So before we dive right into things, can you tell us, did you really turn down the White House for your kids?
I did. I've made a really strong commitment to the days that I'm with my kids because I have joint custody, and I need to make sure that my work doesn't take over my life as a mother.
Awesome, awesome. So from there, what in the world does beating Kid Icarus have to do with anything?
You know, I didn't really know. As a child, all it really meant was that I was able to fight desperate levels of boredom. And I became a video game kid at a very young age. And as a result, it cultivated my capacity to die and regenerate over and over and over again. And that's what I've applied. That's one of the many lessons I've applied on how to manage money, is not to internalize what seems like failure, but be able to get back up again and start climbing. I
like it. And I know after we go through your history a little bit, we're going to talk about the reset button. I think a really important concept and something either we can choose to do ourselves or universe seems to choose for us on occasion as well. So if we go back in time, if we go way on back in time, what was your mom's warning to you at age 5?
My mom's warning to me was, Amanda, make sure you never depend on anyone. Because for her, it wasn't really just about money. It was about this idea that when she and my dad separated, her whole identity had been shattered. And it took her a long time to figure out who she was in the face of independence. So her warning to me was, make sure you figure out the independence thing from the get-go.
How did she start? Now, she was from that generation where if you had a secure marriage, you had a husband who was doing well, you have a really good life. And then she got divorced. How was that for her?
It was really depressing and dark. I would often find her on the edge of her bed crying. And it was confusing, and it was not socially acceptable. And it was a period of, it was dark. We'll just leave it at that.
How did she start to hit that reset button?
You know, she went back and got her MBA. In 1962, she had actually studied math, physics, and computer science, believe it or not, but had never intended to be a professional. So she was able to use those degrees from 20 years earlier to get her MBA in information systems. And it was like she went through her first adolescence that she had never been through at the age of 42, where she started going night clubbing with all of the 22-year-olds in her MBA class.
Very cool. And speaking of dancing, I was reading about, if I understand right, your mom would put on talking heads burning down the house, and you'd be on either the kitchen or the dining room table dancing out to it as well.
Yeah, that's really one of my favorite memories from childhood, because my mom was so sad. When she started to go to nightclubs and started to discover who she was, not just who she thought she was supposed to be, she would just pump music up in our house really, really loud. And sometimes, you know, I was 7, 8 years old. It would result in us dancing on the dining room table. And that was when it really felt like my mom was coming alive.
So fast forwarding from there, how soon was it before you started your first company, and when did things start cranking for you?
That was when I started my first company. I realized it was 1999. It was the dot-com boom. I saw this ridiculous thing happening with Y2K. And so I thought, I'm going to code my first e-commerce website, and I'm going to manufacture something called Y2K Gift. And I bought y2kgift.com, and I went to Chinatown, and I bought rice and beans, and I made all these packages and custom water bottles. It was meant to be a joke, and I only sold one, so it was kind of a disaster, but it was a great way to learn that I could build a business from beginning to end, in theory.
So, well, it's huge because you were learning how to put the systems in place. And something that we've learned with our own business is once you get the systems in place, it becomes a lot easier to replicate and to fine tune from there. You do need to, though, figure out where the market is, a mistake that we've made, I think, a couple times over ourselves. Can you tell us what was Soapbooks?
Yeah, Soapbox was, it's pronounced Soapbox. I know it's spelled with a BXX just because the Soapbox domain was gone. That was my engineering firm that I built specifically to focus on building large-scale technology platforms for nonprofits so that they could fundraise online. It was still the beginning of the internet, so these were novel ideas.
Mm-hmm. So at this time, you were starting to put together what should have been, at least on paper, a dream life. What were you doing, and how were you feeling through this process?
Through the beginning of it, it was great because I had always aspired to make a lot of money, and I'd also really cared about social impact. So the idea that I was building an engineering company to serve nonprofits was a total dream come true. I also realized that I was such a workaholic by age 21. Well, I kind of always have been somewhat ambitious, that I got really concerned that I was going to be alone. I was going to be a cat lady, and that my ambition was going to run over my life, and I was going to turn around one day and be lonely. So I went to every, hi, kitty. Exactly. So I decided at age 23 I needed to get married and have kids. And so what I did was I snowballed myself into this perfect life so fast. It was like I collected everything I thought I was supposed to have. Great husband, had kids, had my business, had everything growing. And I was like, wow, I'm normal. Thank God I made it. So I didn't think that was going to happen.
And so you felt normal, and you started to bring in quite a bit of money. But that actually, it sounds like, in a sense, there was a trap that you were building.
Yeah, I thought because I'd always been focused on money at a young age, I thought that I knew what it meant to be good about money. I even read all of the books, how to budget, how to save, how to invest, and I thought I was following all the rules. But the reality is that I didn't understand that what you think is an asset, like what you think of as an investment, like real estate, can actually be a liability and send you deep into debt. This was beyond me. And so what happened is because I did everything so fast and furious and aggressively, that I ended up going close to $100,000 in debt, even though my whole life had been about financial sustainability.
Let's go from there. You have your home. You have what appears to be a dream life. It's tough to keep up or catch up. It sounds like one of the big challenges at this point was a high level of lifestyle, but something where there wasn't much cash left at the end of the day.
Yeah, it wasn't even a high level of lifestyle. It was this idea that I had grown up with about what my life was supposed to look like. So it wasn't necessarily extravagant, but it was definitely far more than we could afford. But I didn't understand, we didn't understand the formulas that go into assessing that.
So, and then let's, I guess, take it forward from there. Maybe you can tell us who Raw Goddess is and Leah Andrews and what you learned.
Sure. So Raw Goddess is an entrepreneur and activist who I've actually been associated with since my first meditation class at the Omega Institute when I was 22.
Very cool.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's like the oracle. I get scared when I get too close to her because such big things happen in my life. And Leah Endreas, who is now the chief people officer of a company called Nation Builder. This is now 10 years ago. We're running a workshop in New York City on women and money. And I went to it. I was 7 months pregnant. I waddled from my home in Philadelphia to New York City. And it hit me over the head that even though I was super ambitious and earning lots of money, I had certain fundamental beliefs about money that were continuing to perpetuate my debt.
So, and if I understand right, if we take it as kind of a Disney belief, you were living a Cinderella, not a Cinderella story, but a Cinderella belief system that had been overlaid on Amanda.
Yeah, I did. It was, although it wasn't what you might think, it wasn't necessarily that a man would save me. I thought my ambition was going to save me.
And so as you started to learn your money story, was it then that you hit the reset button and really downsized, or what were you doing to internalize this?
It was a journey. The first thing I decided to do was to create an online newsletter called Daily Worth, because I thought if I put this online honestly and authentically, and I don't hide actual truths, then I will be forced to fix my financial problems because I will be held publicly accountable. That was the first thing that I did, was I thought, I'm going through this and I see so many women in particular and men who have all of these ambitions and ideas and dreams of the world we want to create, but this fundamentally disassociated or unhealthy relationship to money. So I thought, how is it that all of us who have these dreams but see money as bad and greedy and evil, or never enough, how are we going to achieve our dreams if we don't have a handle on our personal finances? So I decided to start yet another company devoted to financial advice in a raw, authentic, irreverent way. And that's how Daily Worth was born.
I like it. And to kind of fast forward, I want to keep going with your story here, but one of the themes that I talk about with our guests and the people that I coach often is we dramatically underestimate or overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a year or over time. And it's been 12 or 13 years, I'm guessing. Well, no, maybe not that long, but how many years has it been since you started it?
8 years.
8 years, and you have over 1 million people on your list now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do.
So, and I don't imagine when you started it, you thought you were going to be reaching out to 1 million people.
Actually, I did.
Woohoo!
I'm hoping to get to 5 million in the next 4 years. So
okay, so I've got to dive completely off topic. What are you doing as far as manifestation and intentions, or what kind of alchemy do you have going on behind the scenes?
For me, it always comes down to integrity. Integrity is the root of everything. And whenever I'm in a bad place, I just look at where I'm out of integrity and I start to roll it back in and things start to happen again. And at the most fundamental level, what I realized, when I was married and raising very young children was that my whole life construct was out of integrity. I didn't fit the role of wife. I didn't fit the role of traditional mother. And I needed to hit the reset button and rebuild my life the way I knew I wanted it to exist in my head, not the way I thought it was supposed to exist. So integrity can be as simple as paying back my sister the money that I owe her, or it can be as big as, there's something fundamental about my life that needs to shift because it's no longer working.
Awesome. So were you've done meditation, I'm guessing you've done some mindfulness work. What allowed you then to step back and say, this is out of integrity, and to figure out how to get everything back into alignment? Because that takes a lot of presence.
Yeah, honestly, it was years of depression where I thought that my oversized ambitions were what was causing all these problems to snowball. And so I went to therapy for many years to try and shrink my ambition, and it didn't work. And at a certain point, I just kind of threw my arms up and said, you know what? I am who I am, and I'm never going to get out of this funk unless I become who I am. And it's all kind of weird, deep philosophical identity stuff that I'm not sure we totally understand. This idea of I am something, you are something is a construct unto itself. But regardless, I know I was right at the time because the extent to which I did move into a tiny apartment with peeling linoleum and became single again was really essential to living much more into my dreams now than I was then.
Well, it gets to something, and we'll get there in a minute, but the whole concept of roots and wings that you learned from your mom is so incredibly powerful because you started to learn that it's all going to come from growing strong roots that is going to help you to get your wings.
Exactly.
So let's talk about rewriting your story and maybe what we can learn from Brooke Shields.
Yeah, absolutely. So rewriting your money story is really a lot of us walk around going, women are nurturing, men are providers. Or you might say, I was born a free spirit, or I was born very risk averse. And we have these ideas of being hardwired and built a certain way. But there's a growing body of knowledge that shows that that's not actually the case. We're far more malleable than we realize. And when you start to practice, when you start to identify your thoughts that form your identity that no longer serve you, you can consciously choose to eliminate them and replace them with other thoughts. It really is possible. And that's what I teach. What I teach.
I love it. And so, Brooke Shields, from what I understand, it wasn't until she was 50 that she started rewriting the script that says, I can't understand what's going on with the money. I've got to give that to somebody else and not look at the contracts myself.
Yeah, she thought they were too complicated, and it wasn't until she was 50 that she started to read her own contracts. And it was her revelation of how absolutely ridiculous that was. It's almost unexplainable that women in particular in such powerful roles with such authority would delegate the essential of what makes them powerful and secure.
From there, what's a money coma?
A money coma is the fact that for women culturally, it's often been more acceptable for women than otherwise for women to be disassociated from finance. To be engaged from finance threatens not only our femininity, but our status in society, whether or not we're desirable. It has this strange counter effect than you might otherwise believe. So what a money coma is where so many women live today, which is in a conscious disassociation from money, thinking they're not interested in it or thinking they're bad with it, which enables them to move through life and essentially ignore some of the basic numerical values in their lives.
There was a study, I didn't jot the note down on which it was. I don't remember if it was Harvard or where it was. It blew my mind in your book, and I had to reread this 3 or 4 times. You repeated it several times in the book, and I had to reread it, that talked about women who in the workplace ask for more money or even accept more money are looked down upon.
There is still a fundamental, this is one of the theories I've been developing over the last couple of years I've been writing this book, is that despite individuality, in which the United States is a cultivator of that idea, inside of this idea that we're all multicultural and come from different backgrounds and have different personalities, there are some fundamental social norms that dominate a social structure, which are more powerful than your individual will. And this one about gender dynamics and men's power and women's dependence and the role that money plays in that seems to be almost pervasive. It's only starting to shift slightly, and that's what my work is about, so that women don't have to be dependent, and frankly, men don't have to be the providers. We can live more into what it is that we want as opposed to meeting these social norms. But so far, it's pretty challenging because those social norms are pretty severe. They're pretty heavy-handed.
So to take that on the other side of things, though, I can see the integrity of being able to drop those social norms and in your relationship be who you are, period, and how much of a healthy difference that could make.
Yeah, if you are able to find someone who celebrates independence as much as you do, I've been deeply fortunate to have found that. I wasn't sure that I would. Mm-hmm. It means that you can really meet as two individuals and not get caught up in that domestic struggle of who's doing what, when, why, and whether or not you're right or wrong for wanting to or not wanting to do so.
Awesome. So from there, you have an early exercise in the book I found particularly important. You talk about writing out 2 short lists. One is kind of past beliefs that you used to have about yourself. Can you tell us about this briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to understand what your money story is, it's making a list of all of the things that you believe about money. They could be good things and they can be bad things. They can be things about money in general, like money is the source of evil, or money is what helps people heal. It could be about yourself. I'm really bad with money. I'm out of control. Or I'm great with money. I'm always going to be able to earn more than everyone else because I'm great at that. Or it could be about the state of the economy right now. Wow, because of our political environment, the economy is so unstable. Or wow, because of our new administration, look how much the stock market is growing. You want to make all of those lists so that you can then begin to circle the ones that no longer serve you. And what the rest of that chapter is about is how you identify the ones that are really causing you to sabotage and then creating new expressions. Not expressions necessarily that directly contradict, because that can feel really weird. I was able to say I'm a spender and go to I'm a saver and create that transition. For you, it might be to say I'm really bad with money, to say I'm really good with money might feel like a stretch. Instead, you could say, instead of saying I'm bad with money, you could say I'm learning how to manage my money and I'm making progress, or something to that effect, so that you're rewriting your script so that your ideas about money don't wipe out whatever effort you might make.
Excellent. And what it sounds like is, in a sense, I have an expression I like to use, kind, gentle, easy, good. You're in a very kind, gentle, easy, good manner trying to rewrite the programming of your subconscious without it going into a fight or flight response and smacking you upside the head.
Totally, because there will be moments when you still get cut off at the knees, like when my emergency fund gets wiped out and I'm like, see, I am out of control. I'm not a saver. And those will continue to challenge you. And so always returning to that list of things that are also true is really important to write down, put on your fridge, put in the front of your notebook, so that especially when those situations happen 6 months down the line, that you don't spiral backwards. Thank
you. From there, let's go to some great mom advice that you got here. And what does it mean? Grow your roots, spread your wings.
So my mom I thought she was somewhat odd when I was growing up because I had no rules. I could watch as much TV as I wanted, play as much video games, eat sugar cereal in front of the TV for dinner, and it just wasn't a problem. And I would often say to her, Mom, why are we like this? Why don't you put rules on me? And she would say, Amanda, because I really believe as your mother that I only need to give you 2 things in life. The first is roots, to know that you have a family that loves you, security. And second is wings, which is to give you the confidence that you need in order to do anything that you want in life. And she said, if I can give you those 2 things, then I feel as your mother, I've given you everything that you need. And that was really profound for me, because it was also what gave me a really strong core to make sure I was developing those. And man, did I get into trouble, and did I experiment up and down with anything and everything you really hope your kid doesn't do. But as a result, it made me a strong person who has been able to, survive a lot these days.
Awesome. So let's talk then about, and go mom.
I know.
It's huge. It's huge what she did, because she got right to the fundamentals, to the essence of what was important for you.
I know, it's cute. She's very shy and timid and does not like the spotlight. And this is all bringing a lot of shine on her. It's going to be funny to watch over the next couple of months, especially as people celebrate her. She's going to go like this.
Oh, okay. Can you share her name? Or at least her first name?
Oh, yeah, Shelley.
Shelley.
Wolf.
You go, Shelley. So let's talk about roots here. What do roots look like, and why is it so important?
So roots, when it comes to your personal finances, is an investment where you build equity. That is something that is permitted in the American economy and many other economies. It's part of what makes capitalism capitalism, is this idea that we can have ownership of property. The great thing about having ownership of property, whether that's a stock or a home or a business, is that it has the opportunity to appreciate, which means it can grow in value even if you don't earn any more money. It also is great because you can borrow against it or liquidate it in the future. It's challenging, however, because there's risk associated with every type of asset or equity, and there's also expenses associated. So they're very tricky to plant those roots, and that's what the whole second section of the book about is. How do you understand what all those roots are, and how do you pick the right ones for you based on your lifestyle and how you look at the world?
That makes sense. And I want to dive more into roots. Maybe the word that we need to wrap our minds around first is understanding. Actually, it's two words: net worth. What does that really mean?
Net worth is a core concept of the book, because in particular for women who only entered the workforce, let's call it 3 or 4 decades ago, we're still so new to the subject of money. And so the things that are most immediately within reach when you're new to the idea of money is how much do you earn, your income, and your budget. As a result of that, though, most people and women feel overwhelmed when it comes to your money, because budgeting is really hard and it only works for 30%. So as a result, I've introduced the concept of net worth to take your mind off of income and off of budgeting to focus on the one number that really matters. And I'll explain why. Yeah. Your net worth is the collection of everything you own. Let's say your home is worth $500,000 and you have $100,000 in your retirement account, and that's what you have. That's $600,000. And let's say you've got a $300,000 mortgage. That means that your net worth is $300,000, because I subtracted $600,000 of the total ownership minus $300,000 in your debt, and that leaves you with a net worth of $300,000. That's important because by having positive net worth, that means that you don't owe more than you own, and that is where you generate security. So focusing on that one number, it's okay if it's negative, especially if you're investing in a college education or at the beginning of your home purchase. The point is it's not just about how much you budget and how much you save or even how much you earn. It's about how you move that net worth number positive.
It also means then that our buying decisions, for instance, buying a home, like you're saying, it may not increase your net worth. In fact, homes can be very hungry in the beginning, as you describe them.
Yeah, there's all these expenses that go into the purchase of a home. So, for example, if your home costs $500,000 and you take out a $400,000 mortgage, you're actually, in most instances, going to be paying interest on that mortgage for the first couple of years and very little or none of the principal. As a result of that, you're not actually building more equity when you pay your mortgage. At the same time, homes take a lot of expenses. And so you may have to invest in redoing the kitchen or fixing a water boiler, again, which is going to further the expenses you need to put into the house before it starts appreciating. It all depends on the market, of course, and how long you're going to stay there and what the other houses on the block cost. The important part to understand is that just because you're buying a house does not mean that you are building net worth.
It was fascinating also to read you have at the end kind of a comparison of where you lived early on, which was the most expensive house on the block, versus your boyfriend who bought the least expensive house on the block.
Yeah, exactly. So after I moved out of our house, which was the most expensive one on the block, I actually moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with me and my kids that was, I think my housing costs went from about $3,500 a month to $1,200 a month, to give you an idea. And that was because I realized I needed to strip down to as close to nothingness as I could, so that I could rebuild with consciousness and understanding of cash flow.
There's something so spiritual in there about stripping down to nothingness and be rebuilding consciously.
Otherwise, if you're just fixing, it doesn't work. It's like you can try and strip away and cancel your cable bill and bring your lunch to work. But when you're in $90,000 in debt, is not going to change anything.
So I guess that explains why you have an important concept in here, that building net worth is not about earning as much money as possible.
That's only one part of it, but it's definitely no guarantee, because if you don't understand your taxes and you see that as a liberty to spend more, it can actually propel you further into debt just because you make more money. Just be really careful of the implications of that.
So what's good debt versus bad debt? And you kind of alluded to it before with, I think, education.
Yeah, good debt versus bad debt really has to do with when you have an extra $1,000 at the end of the month, are you going to put it in savings? Are you going to put it into your investment? Or are you going to put it to pay down your debt? Now, if you have a mortgage and you're paying 3% annually on that mortgage, and you have an extra $1,000, you might ask yourself, do I want to put that $1,000 towards my mortgage, or do I want to put it into my retirement account? The way we talk about investing in Worth It is a style of investing called passive investing. That means that you're buying really broad-based ETFs and mutual funds, and you're currently seeking about 5% returns on that money annually. It doesn't mean you'll always get 5%. It just means you'll always get about 5% up and down over the years. It's really for the long term. So good debt and bad debt has to do with the fact that if you're going to put your money into a retirement account and earn 5% on it versus add more to your mortgage where you're only paying 3%, there's just a 2%, sacrifice that you're making there. It makes sense to extend those mortgage payments and put more into your investment so that you're simply growing your money, you're growing your net worth faster.
I think that's a key concept that's probably worth repeating one more time for people. Absolutely.
So there's all these different places you can put your money. You can put it in savings, you can put it towards your debt, or you can put it towards your investment. There's what I consider the gentlest way to build net worth is to open up a retirement account at a place like Vanguard or Fidelity or your 401k or the company that I run, which is called Worth FM. And when you open up a retirement account, what you get in most of the companies that I've mentioned, although you always have to look at the specifics, is a broad-based, globally diversified portfolio. This means that you're invested a tiny bit across as much of the world equity as you possibly can be, which means that you are protected from the big swings in the market and you are growing. You're growing with the market. You're not trying to beat the market. As a result, history tells us that you're going to get about 5% per year growth. Some might say 7%. Some might say less. No one really, really knows, but that's a good rule of thumb. At the same time, if you're paying 25% on your credit card, you want to put more of your extra cash towards your credit card than you'd want to towards your retirement, because 25% versus 5%, it's going to be way more expensive to carry that debt. However, if your debt is in the form of student loans and you're paying 4%, or a mortgage and you're paying 3.5%, then you don't want to speed up the payment of that debt, because you're going to grow your net worth faster by investing in the markets for the long term.
Very cool.
That's where net worth becomes the single judge by which you can make all these decisions around cash flow.
Where do Nerf guns fit into this?
You tell me. I'm forgetting.
It said Nerf guns and 10-year-olds. You said...
Oh, right. Okay, I remember. No one's asked me this yet. So Nerf guns is... one of the things that I've done in my life to shift my financial experience is there's all this pressure as parents to spend money on kids' birthday gifts and birthday parties. And, sometimes I do indulge in those, but if I'm in a really tight financial position, I don't. And I graciously say to the parents that we're not bringing a gift, mostly because oftentimes when I'm close with the families, because I know they're going to get 15 gifts and I know they don't really care. So it's about not just sacrificing your financial future so that you fit into cultural norms, but being able to step up to those cultural norms when you're not able to take care of yourself. And people still love you, and they love you even more sometimes.
Woohoo! So from there, let's talk about knowing ourselves. And there are 5 money types, and maybe we can talk real briefly about each. I'm in the visionary category, and so I've had to really watch that myself. So maybe you can start with visionary for us.
Sure. So I developed Money Type, which is, you can go find it, moneytype.me, which is a personality assessment to help you understand what your unique strengths are with money and also what your sabotage patterns are with money. Oftentimes they're interrelated. So there's 5 types: visionary, producer, epicure, nurturer, and independent. I too am a visionary, so we have a lot in common that we can discuss. So from a visionary standpoint, visionaries are the ones who are most motivated by our impact in the world. We are, whether or not you have the attributes of the other types is totally dependent on you. You can be a strong nurturer and a strong visionary. Or for me, I'm a strong visionary and a very, very weak epicure, which means material gain actually has very little motivation for me. If you hold a big house in front of me now, I wonder why. It's not a motivator. It just looks like more work and more to clean. So as a visionary, what's typical for someone who's very impact and future oriented is that we move really, really fast. We're good at making money, but we also have so much risk in our lives that we have just as much chance that we're going to wipe ourselves out from something that we weren't paying attention to. So it's especially important that visionaries keep a very strong amount of savings, liquid savings, so that we can cushion the blow, which we typically create often.
And I think that's important to realize, because as a visionary, I'm guessing your modus operandi, certainly mine in the past was, no longer is, says was, because I've learned this myself, is let's put everything we can into the business, into our vision, put it in, put it in, put it in, and without the safety net.
It's ugly. Yeah, without the safety net, you're actually doing your business a disservice. Because if you can't take care of yourself and you're unstable and you're worrying about how you're going to pay your bills and how you're going to call people because you owe someone money and they keep calling you and you need to push them off, that's a distraction from what else you want to be doing in the world. So taking care of yourself actually makes your business stronger because you're stronger.
I like that theme as a life theme as well, to put the oxygen mask on yourself before anybody else. From there, let's talk about a few of the others. Epicure.
So epicure is really motivated by sensory. And I know so many of my people in my life are epicures, and I love them because they have beautiful spaces and everything is elegant. They're often very polished. They typically take gorgeous vacations, and they're living the fullest life. They really are celebratory and have a lot of pleasure. That's what's most motivating to them. And they are, but of course, they have very little motivation to save, because anytime they have money in their savings account, they want to be spending it on a trip. So for epicures, just like visionaries, it's important that they keep a robust savings. And for them, their best route is most likely a house, because they care so much about their physical environment. But you don't want them to buy too much of a house, because then they'll be cash poor and they won't be able to travel or buy other things. So epicures most likely would want to buy a house, but we want to really encourage you to buy a much smaller house so that you have more cash.
Yeah, you talk about when you were 12 years old visiting a friend's McMansion, and it was all beautiful on the outside. I think the grass looked like artificial turf or something, but you went inside and there was nothing.
There was no art on the walls. There was no furniture, and it looked like they had just moved in, but they hadn't. They lived there for 2 years, and it was when my aunt came to pick me up. She was like, yep, this is what happens a lot here. And it was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and everywhere, honestly, is these big McMansion type homes where that's kind of wipes you out, and then you can't really do anything else. But we don't know these formulas. We don't know these things. We think our lives are supposed to look a certain way, and then we get ourselves into these messes where we're trapped.
So from there, this is a real common one out of heart, even, the nurturer.
Yeah. So the nurturer is most inspired by being able to take care of others in their lives. And the challenge for nurturers is I, Amanda Steinberg, can stand in front of a nurturer and say, you really need to save. You really need to invest. You need to really care about you. And it's just going to go right over their head, because they don't have the internal dialogue at this point where taking care of themselves is a strength. They're so focused on the relationships in their lives, and that's how they get pleasure and value. So what's important to them is that we help them think about saving, investing, so they can take care of others in their lives better, as opposed to trying to fix or change themselves, because, they may be very happy being who they are.
And speaking of being happy who you are, the independent, who I have a lot of friends who are independents, and I worry about them for their later years.
Yes. Yeah, the independents are the ones who are least interested in money in general. My friend Allie Brown, you can go to alliebrown.com. She's one of my mentors and an incredibly successful entrepreneur. She is off the charts independent. And it's so funny, we're talking about her 401k and where she's moving her assets and does she understand what her expense ratio is and stuff. And she's like, ugh, Amanda, I just can't pay attention to any of it. And but she's recognizing that she needs to automate, get herself in a really simple environment where she knows it's safe for the long term, automate as much of it as possible, because she's going to struggle to pay attention because she just sold her house in Arizona because she wants to travel around the world. Classic independent, doesn't want to be tied down, doesn't want overhead, just set me free and let me go. So your finances need to be extra automated and simple to make sure you can pay as little attention to them as possible without putting yourself at risk.
That makes sense. And the last one, the producer.
The producer are typically the ones who have the best money situation. The producers are the ones who are planning oriented, analytical, and I think of as like Martha Stewart, where everything has its own color-coded box and its own bucket, and they've figured everything out. The challenge for producers is that they typically keep most of their money in savings and invest very little of it. So that's not necessarily a bad thing for them. It's just important for them to know that, to make money, you have to take risks. And sometimes there's more risk in what you don't do than what you do. So consider learning more about risks so that you don't see it as a threat to your money, but an opportunity to grow your money more than what you have today.
Thank you. And speaking about risks, this is a good segue. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but it bears diving into more the difference between active investing and passive.
Yeah, so there's two styles of investing essentially out there, and I found it to be more religion than science. I have plenty of incredibly successful friends and colleagues who either fit on one side or the other or do a blend of both. And here's the difference. There is the stock market, and there's the U.S. stock market, which is the S&P, and then there's the global stock market. And they grow. Every day you can look up on Yahoo Finance or wherever you go, is it up? Is it down? It's a particular pattern. What financial services and financial advisors have typically done in the past is try to beat the market. That's where it gets exciting. That's why you're going to go to Merrill Lynch over Morgan Stanley over JP Morgan, is you want to make the most money on your money, and that's what you're paying a broker or a financial advisor to do. However, in recent years, with the advent of mutual funds and what Vanguard really pioneered, there's plenty of studies, of course all studies have some level of subjectivity to them, that show that 80% of financial advisors and brokers who are trying to beat the market don't, when you factor in long-term growth of the ups and downs and the fees that you are paying them relative to the fees of a passive investment. So you have to choose for yourself. Do you want to be someone who beats the market and you're willing to take the risk of not beating the market? Or do you want to park your money for the long term, for the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the next 30 years in a passively invested mutual fund or portfolio of ETFs? And Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab is a place to do that. My company, Worth FM, Betterment, or Wealthfront, those are all examples of places you can go to look up how to become a passive investor on your own terms. And it's really a stylistic thing. Which one do I want to be in? I feel much safer and at ease putting my money passively and then focusing on my income.
How do we wrap our minds around that? The term, for lack of another term that comes to mind, is it doesn't sound sexy to be just thinking, we just had Snapchat and an IPO and a while back Facebook, I guess it was more than a while back now. But all these are very exciting, but there's also a big risk associated with them.
To me, exciting is having enough money when I need it. So
I like
go
that.
Get your thrills somewhere else. If you're looking for that high, figure out somewhere else to get it. No, seriously. I mean, I play with the stock market just for fun. I typically lose every time. I put like $2,000 a couple of months ago into oil because all the news was saying oil was at rock bottom, and they always say buy low, sell high. I bought oil. It tanked the next day. And I was like, Amanda, follow your own advice. But other people spend a lot more time on it and are successful at it. So I recommend that the vast majority of your retirement and your assets are passively invested. And you take a certain amount that you can afford to gamble and play with it and see if you're good at it. I have friends by the names of Joanne and Fred Wilson who are incredibly successful venture capitalists. They only invest in companies. They don't, at least a few years ago, they didn't invest in the stock market. That may have changed. But stylistically, it's a personality thing. Just be aware of the risks and make sure that if you lose everything, you knew that was a possibility.
Is it ever, you mentioned the word retirement a minute ago, is it ever too early to start thinking of retirement? And if we're going along month to month, should we still be trying to do kind of it's in the book on Babylon, I'm getting the name wrong, and so many other books, a 10% account? Should we do anything possible to get some money over into the untouchable category?
Yeah, it is too early to think about retirement until you've done a few things. The first is to establish your own income, because most retirement plans require it be your income in order to contribute to it. There's a few exceptions to that, but generally that's the case. And the second is to make sure you have a liquid cash bank account. There's plenty of people who max out their 401k but don't have any savings, and therefore they're generating expensive credit card debt. That's a perfect example of where your net worth is going down even though you're investing. So make sure that you establish the experts say it should be 3 to 6 months. Most people I know can't get to 3 to 6 months, and there's zero shame in that. So what I do is I recommend that if you have an extra $500, put $250 into your emergency fund, into your cash savings, and then put $250 into a retirement account. But make sure you're focusing on building that cash savings first, so that you get the experience of having cash sit there that you're not spending. That's a muscle unto itself. Because I kind of spend it all the time.
That kind of goes back to net worth, which is, if we were to have a second figure, I guess you would say, is not only do we want to know what our net worth is, but what is the cash on hand or liquid assets in case of an emergency that you're able to quickly do something with.
Yeah, and actually cash is part of your net worth. So if you have a lot sitting in cash, that's part of your assets that goes into that formula. Just be careful about credit card debt, because soon you're paying 25% annualized, even when you thought it was a zero interest credit card, because you were like 3 seconds late on your payment. I've been there before. I thought I was on a zero interest card, and suddenly I've got like $400 interest, and then I'm on the phone yelling at someone. But just be careful, because there's all these. That's the balance of the equation. Is you might think you're doing it right, but actually your net worth is going negative, so you're not serving your long-term security.
So thank you. And on that note, you have such a great line in here. I think it bears repeating. In greatest service to yourself and your loved ones, don't live within your means. Live as far below your means as you can.
I'm practicing this one every day. It's hard. But the reality that I have found, especially with the pressures of raising children and running a business, is that the curveballs of finance are so extraordinary. The expenses that you accrue can snowball so rapidly, and the things you want to do in life become ever expanding. So if you build expensive overhead and you're living a life that prohibits you from doing all of these things, essentially what you're doing is you're investing in a physical environment at the risk of not being able to do anything else. Mm-hmm. So figure out how it is you can be happy with as little as possible so that you maximize your freedom.
Woohoo! How do we start to overcome overspending?
Here's the method that I've developed that's worked profoundly well for me, is that I created a system where I have 2 checking accounts. Mm-hmm. I have my Sustain bank account and my Spend bank account. And in my Sustain bank account is where I just keep enough to pay my bills. Then I move into my Spend account every time I get a paycheck. Even though I'm an entrepreneur, I put myself on a regular paycheck. I move how much I can afford to spend on a separate spending account. That way, it happens to be at Capital One 360. I can look when I'm in line at Target, which is often. I can look up the balance of my 2-week cash flow and say, do I have enough to afford all this or don't I? And if I don't, I have to put stuff back, or else I'm going to be putting stuff on the credit card, and that's not fun. So that is the first way, is make sure you separate your bill paying from your spending so that you know how much you have. Otherwise, it's like impossible to look at your bank balance and know what you can actually afford.
That makes sense. Well, why don't we want to shop hangry?
You don't want to shop hangry because you are ultimately going to overspend. It's you really want to, and I am the worst practitioner of this, so it's funny when I talk about this. I have to practice what I preach, and don't always. And it is just so easy. Target is the queen of this for me. Just the entire environment is designed to convince you that your life will be better if you spend more there. Especially with regards to food shopping, you can live really comfortably on $50 a week worth of groceries. I know you're all yelling at me right now. And if you shop hangry, you are going to use that kind of anger emotion, and you're going to end up spending 4 times as much. Is that necessary? No. If you eat an apple firsthand, you won't do that.
So, and for those who didn't catch it, hangry is shopping hungry, always a big no-no at the grocery store, or angry, which is just, I imagine you're just messing yourself up.
Yeah, it's the term hangry that I first heard is really because you're so hungry that you become angry. It's like anger manifested through hunger.
Bad news. Bad news. So speaking of, I don't know if we want to call this bad news, but it was interesting news. What can we learn from your daughter Maya in the green room?
Actually, what can we learn not to do with a 6-year-old? I brought Maya to New York City with me because I wanted her to see where mommy goes every day.
And she was waiting by the front door.
She was. It was so cute. I mean, I usually have to flicker the lights every morning in order to get my kids out of bed, in order to get them dressed. But Maya was so excited. I was going to finally take her to work with me in New York City. And she was awake at 6 a.m. with her clothes on and her backpack with all of her stuffies ready to go before my alarm had even gone off. This kid could not wait. So we got on Amtrak and we went to New York City. And it was a total disaster. I mean, she was running down the streets. She was licking water fountains. I'm in heels. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't even wear heels anymore. And she was completely wiped out. I then had a speaking engagement at She Summit with Claudia Chan uptown. This was a couple years ago now. And I thought, oh, I'll bring Maya with me. She can see mommy on stage. She can realize what it's like to live your life on your own terms, in charge, the boss, etc. I left her in the green room, came back. She sat in the corner, screamed at the top of her lungs, and kicked someone in the shins. It was the most embarrassing, horrifying day. And she and I had to leave and go home. I actually have pictures of me lying on the 2 chairs on Amtrak and her still standing looking out the window thinking, I'm glad this kid's still standing because I'm not. But, so there were 2 lessons from that. First was, don't bring your kid to work if you want to get anything done. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, bring your kid to work because even if it's a struggle, you get to really experience what it's like where we're not just trying to fit into other people's rules, but we're really starting to write our own rules. And that is the greatest thrill.
Awesome. So on that note, Jessica, my wife, she's the producer. She always likes me to ask a question about parents and kids. What words of wisdom would you give to parents to teach their kids, or what are you teaching your kids and at this early age?
The thing that I teach my kids the most when it comes to money is that whenever they get money in their piggy bank, that they're allowed to spend half and save half. And this is kind of an arbitrary thing because they're going, well, what am I saving for? And I'm saying, you're saving just to save. And my son in particular, who already has like the keyboard and the mouse and the screen and everything that he's building in his Minecraft world, does not like the idea of not being able to get the upgraded mouse. But I have drawn a very hard line of saying you're only allowed to spend half of what you have so they gain the experience of saving, something I never figured out until later in life.
And on that note, thank you. I think that's important words of wisdom because it really helps their mind wrap their mind around sort of like entrepreneurs and taxes. Entrepreneurs will spend, not realizing that, wait a second, particularly if you're not paying quarterly, you can get yourself in some real trouble really fast. And so you're training them at an early age.
Exactly. Hopefully. We'll see. I mean, as I've known, with my older sisters, my mom did lots of things with all 3 of us, and we all ended up very different. Mm-hmm. They may adopt these lessons, they may not. I also try and pay very close attention to what their particular personalities are and cultivating their strengths as opposed to just trying to fit them into my box.
Awesome. So on that note, you were talking about saving just a minute ago. How did you switch yourself from the default of a spender to the default of a saver?
It's still a daily practice, which is starting with very small actions. It comes back to integrity. So the first thing I do when my emergency fund gets wiped out, which is, it gets less and less over time, but it still happens, especially in the summertime when camp and trips and stuff come up that I seem to forget about, is you have to prove to yourself that you're a saver. Otherwise, you won't believe yourself. The first thing I do is I find a mason jar and I collect all of the bills and coins in my house and I put them in and I put it up on the window and I point at it and say, I'm a saver. Then I log into my credit cards and I find the Hulu subscription, which I haven't used in 3 months, and I turn it off and I calculate how much I just saved for the next year. And I take that amount and I move it into my savings and I watch my savings grow. And I go, oh, I'm even more of a saver. And then the third thing that I do is I will take a very specific action. Like if I'm in New York City away from my home in Philadelphia and I really want to take a cab or an Uber, I get on the subway, I calculate how much it would have cost, and then I move that money from checkings to savings. And if you do this enough times, you start to actually identify as a saver, and it manifests manifests differently in your life.
Woohoo! So on that note, before we wrap things up, just a few last wrap-up questions. We always like to ask our guests, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
There's two things right now. One is my partner, Jordan. I really thought because of my ambition and my quirky personality that I was just going to be alone for the rest of my life after my divorce. And being with a man who is really strong, but also lets me be me fully still blows my mind every day. We've been together about 6 years. And the second thing is certain types of music. I don't know if you ever heard of Burning Man. It's a big festival in the desert. I've been going since 2002. And there's a lot of music out there, in particular a DJ called the Scum Frog. And another one called Random Rab. You can check them out. Listening to their music, very, very different. And I've actually gotten to know the DJ Scum Frog. His real name is Jesse over the years. And music like that is just profoundly mind-altering and calming in a world that otherwise seems like chaos. So those are the two things. Interesting,
because we haven't really discussed Burning Man on the show, but and I've done over 500 interviews, but it's interesting because Burning Man is a non-currency environment.
It is.
So,
or I would say currency isn't monetary. There's still currency, but it's more about energy, contribution, gifts, and material objects, as opposed to equating everything to a single monetary system.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. On that note, where can people go to get Worth It and to find out more?
Absolutely. You can go to www.amandasteinberg.net. Or you can go to www.dailyworth.com, or you can go right to Amazon and you can search Worth It Amanda Steinberg, and it will be right there.
Fantastic. This has been really fun. Any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with people?
No, just, I appreciate everyone being here. Money is a yucky subject, and I'm sure you might have questioned whether or not you were going to sit through something about money because it brings up all this guilt and shame and fear. So I just want to thank you so much for being here and listening, because I hope that it's liberated you from what some of those other constructs might have been otherwise.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for being on the show. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get worth it, and become a saver too, and shine bright. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you have fun?
I had so much fun. I've never been asked, I've had 4 journalists now say, I was only going to read 3 chapters of your book, but I read the whole thing, which to me was like, good. I didn't write a boring money book. But I haven't had anyone ask nearly the depth. That's why the Nerf gun thing, I was like, Nerf gun, no one's asked me that in a while. And it could mean all sorts of things when it comes to me. So that was phenomenal. Thank you for digging so deep into it.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!